The Montana sun was just breaking over the crazy mountains when 12-year-old Jake Morrison heard the sound that every rancher dreaded, the thunder of hoof beats in the pre-dawn darkness, moving fast and heading away from the ranch with stolen horses. Jake had been sleeping in the barn loft, as he had every night for the past 2 weeks since arriving at the Circle M Ranch. As an orphan looking for work, he'd been given a trial period by rancher Matt Sullivan, who was skeptical about hiring someone so young but desperate enough for help to give the boy a chance. Now, as Jake peered through the loft window, he could see shadowy figures driving away the ranch's prize horses, including Thunder, the magnificent black stallion that was Matt's pride and joy. The thieves had worked quietly and efficiently, clearly professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. Jake's first instinct was to run to the main house and wake Matt, but something made him pause. By the time they roused the ranch hands and saddled horses for pursuit, the thieves would have hours of head start. The stolen horses would be long gone, probably sold to unscrupulous buyers before anyone could track them down. But Jake had noticed something during his 2 weeks at the ranch that the adult hands had missed. The thieves had been scouting the property for days, leaving subtle signs of their presence that only someone with sharp eyes and nothing to lose would bother to observe. More importantly, Jake thought he knew where they were going. Instead of waking Matt, Jake made a decision that would either prove his worth or get him fired. Assuming he survived what he was planning to do, quietly, he climbed down from the loft and saddled Pepper, the smallest and fastest horse on the ranch. As an orphan who'd been on his own for 3 years, Jake had learned to think strategically about survival, and right now he was calculating odds that would have terrified most adults. The thieves had a significant head start, but they were driving a herd of stolen horses, which would slow them down considerably. Jake was riding light and fast, and he knew the terrain better than strangers would. Most importantly, he was betting that the thieves would take the obvious route toward the territorial border, where they could sell the horses with minimal questions asked. Jake had grown up in this country before his parents died, and he knew every trail, every shortcut, every piece of rough ground between the Circle M and the border. If he was right about the thieves' destination, he could cut them off at Devil's Canyon, where the trail narrowed to a single path between high rock walls. The ride through the darkness was treacherous, but Jake pushed Pepper hard, using his innate knowledge of the landscape to navigate by starlight. His plan was risky to the point of being suicidal. One 12-year-old boy against a gang of armed horse thieves. But Jake had learned something important. During his 3 years of surviving on his own, sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was nothing at all. As dawn broke, Jake reached Devil's Canyon ahead of the stolen herd and quickly surveyed the terrain. The canyon was perfect for what he had in mind, a narrow passage with high walls on both sides, and most importantly, a section where recent rock slides had left the trail partially blocked. Jake tied Pepper safely out of sight and began implementing a plan that was equal parts brilliant and desperate. Using his rope and some fallen branches, he rigged a simple but effective trap across the narrowest part of the trail. Then he climbed up into the rocks on the canyon wall, positioning himself where he could see the approaching thieves while remaining hidden. An hour later, he heard them coming, the sound of horses' hooves echoing off the canyon walls, mixed with the voices of men who thought they'd pulled off the perfect crime. There were 4 thieves, just as Jake had estimated from the tracks he'd observed around the ranch. They were driving 15 horses, including Thunder, and they looked confident and relaxed as they approached what they assumed was clear passage to the border. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe the brilliant trap this young boy sets for seasoned criminals. The lead thief, a bearded man in his 30s, was the first to notice Jake's improvised barricade across the trail. "What the hell?" he muttered, reining in his horse and signaling for the others to stop. That's when Jake put the second part of his plan into action. "You men are trespassing on Circle M property," Jake called out from his hiding place in the rocks, his young voice echoing dramatically off the canyon walls. "Drop your weapons and surrender the stolen horses." The thieves looked around frantically, trying to locate the source of the voice. From their perspective, they were facing an unknown number of hidden gunmen in an ideal ambush position, where Not looking for trouble, the lead thief called out. "We're just passing through with our horses." "Those horses belong to Matt Sullivan," Jake replied, trying to make his voice sound deeper and more authoritative. "We've been tracking you since you left the ranch." The thieves exchanged nervous glances. They'd expected to be long gone before anyone discovered the theft, and now they were trapped in a canyon with what sounded like armed ranch hands positioned in the rocks above them. "Look," the lead thief said, "we can work something out. No need for shooting." Jake realized this was the critical moment. The thieves were rattled, but they weren't stupid. If they had time to think, they'd realize they were being bluffed by a single person. "You have 30 seconds to release those horses and ride out," Jake announced. "After that, we start shooting." The bluff worked better than Jake had dared hope. Convinced they were outnumbered and outgunned, the thieves quickly released the stolen horses and spurred their own mounts back the way they'd come, abandoning their prey rather than risk a fight in such disadvantageous terrain. As the sound of their retreat faded, Jake climbed down from his hiding place and began the challenging task of gathering the scattered horses for the return trip to the Circle M. When Matt Sullivan and his ranch hands found Jake 3 hours later, driving the entire herd of recovered horses back toward home, the rancher could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Jake," Matt said, his voice filled with amazement, "how did you manage this?" "I noticed they'd been scouting the ranch," Jake explained matter-of-factly. "Figured they'd head for the border through Devil's Canyon, so I got there first and convinced them they were outnumbered." Matt looked at this remarkable boy who had single-handedly recovered 15 stolen horses through pure intelligence and courage. "That kid's got fire in him," Matt said to his foreman, loud enough for Jake to hear. But what Matt didn't yet understand was that Jake's achievement was more than just recovering stolen property. The boy had proven something about character, intelligence, and the kind of courage that couldn't be taught or faked. Word of Jake Morrison's single-handed recovery of the stolen horses spread through the Montana territory faster than wildfire. Within a week, the story had reached every ranch, trading post, and saloon between the Crazy Mountains and the territorial capital, growing in the telling until some versions had the 12-year-old boy taking on a dozen armed thieves in a spectacular gunfight. But Matt Sullivan knew the truth was even more impressive than the exaggerated stories. Jake hadn't won through violence or luck. He'd won through intelligence, planning, and the kind of strategic thinking that most adults never mastered. "Jake," Matt said one evening as they sat on the ranch house porch, "I've been thinking about what you did with those horse thieves." Jake looked up from the harness he was mending, his hands never pausing in their work. In the 3 weeks since the incident, the boy had thrown himself into ranch work with even greater determination, as if he was afraid that his moment of heroism might not be enough to secure his place. "What about it, Mr. Sullivan?" "I've been wondering how you knew they were scouting the ranch before they struck." My experienced hands didn't notice anything. Jake set down the leather he was working on and considered his answer carefully. "Mr. Sullivan, when you've been on your own as long as I have, you learn to pay attention to things that don't belong. Small things, like horse tracks that appear and disappear, or the way animals act when strangers have been around." Matt nodded, understanding that Jake's difficult life had taught him survival skills that went far beyond what most children his age possessed. "There's something else," Jake continued. "When you don't have a home or family to protect you, you learn to think ahead about danger. Those thieves weren't just random criminals. They knew exactly which horses to take and how to get them out fast. That meant they'd been watching us, and you figured out their escape route. Devil's Canyon was the obvious choice if they wanted to reach the border quickly. I just got there first and made them think they were walking into a trap." Matt studied Jake's young face, seeing the intelligence and maturity that hardship had forced upon him. "Jake, what do you want to do with your life? I mean, long term?" The question surprised Jake. Most adults in his experience didn't ask orphan boys about their long-term plans. "I want to belong somewhere," Jake said honestly. "I want to have a place where people know my name and trust me to do important work." "You mean like being a rancher?" Jake shook his head. "I've been thinking about that, Mr. Sullivan. What I did with those horse thieves wasn't really ranching. It was more like Like being a detective or a lawman, Matt felt something click into place in his mind. Jake, have you ever thought about becoming a territorial marshal? Could someone like me do that? Jake asked, his eyes lighting up with interest. Someone exactly like you, Matt replied. The territory needs lawmen who can think strategically, who notice details that others miss, and who have the courage to act on their observations. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a visitor that neither of them had expected. Federal Marshal Tom Bradley rode up to the ranch house, his badge glinting in the evening sunlight. Matt Sullivan, Bradley, said, dismounting from his horse, I hear you've got quite a remarkable young man working for you. Marshal Bradley, Matt replied, standing to greet the lawman. This is Jake Morrison, the boy I told you about in my letter. Bradley studied Jake with the intensity of someone who'd spent years evaluating character under pressure. Son, I understand. You single-handedly recovered 15 stolen horses from a gang of professional thieves. Yes, sir. Jake replied simply. How? Over the next hour, Jake recounted his actions in detail, from noticing the signs of scouting to setting up the ambush at Devil's Canyon. Bradley listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed his own professional expertise. Remarkable, Bradley said when Jake finished. You showed more strategic thinking than most of my experienced deputies. Tell me, Jake, what do you know about law enforcement? Not much, sir. But I know the difference between right and wrong. And I know that sometimes you have to take risks to protect what matters. Subscribe to our channel now. The incredible opportunity that's about to be offered will change Jake's life forever. Bradley exchanged glances with Matt before continuing. Jake, the Territorial Marshal Service has a training program for young men who show exceptional promise. It's demanding work, and it requires intelligence, courage, and absolute integrity. What kind of training? Jake asked. Learning territorial law, investigation techniques, tracking, and yes, some weapons training. But most importantly, learning how to think like a criminal in order to catch criminals. Jake's heart raced at the possibility Bradley was describing. Are you offering me a chance, sir? I'm offering you a chance to earn a chance, Bradley corrected. 6 months of training and evaluation. If you prove yourself, you'd start as a junior deputy with full authority and a real future in law enforcement. Matt watched Jake's face carefully, seeing the excitement and determination in the boy's expression. Jake, this is exactly what you were meant to do, Mr. Sullivan, Jake said. I don't want to leave you short-handed after you took a chance on me. Matt smiled at the boy's loyalty and sense of responsibility. Jake, the best thing you can do to repay my faith in you is to become the man you're meant to be. And that man is clearly going to be a lawman. That night, as Jake packed his few belongings for the journey to the territorial capital, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a homeless orphan hoping for temporary work. Now he was embarking on a career that could make him one of the most respected lawmen in the territory. But more importantly, he'd discovered something about himself that he'd never known. He had the kind of mind that could outthink criminals, the kind of courage that could face danger alone, and the kind of character that earned respect from men like Matt Sullivan and Marshal Bradley. The kid with fire had found his calling, and the territory was about to gain one of its finest lawmen. 5 years had passed since Jake Morrison left the Circle M Ranch to begin his training as a territorial marshal, and the transformation in both his life and his reputation had exceeded everyone's expectations. At 17, Jake was already known throughout the Montana Territory as one of the most effective young lawmen in the service, with a record of solved cases that impressed even veteran marshals. But it was his innovative approach to law enforcement that truly set him apart. Jake had developed techniques for tracking criminals, gathering evidence, and conducting investigations that other lawmen were now studying and adopting. His ability to think like a criminal while maintaining absolute integrity had made him legendary among both honest citizens and the outlaws who feared him. Now, Jake was returning to the Circle M Ranch for the first time since leaving for marshal training, but not for a social visit. He was investigating a series of cattle thefts that had been plaguing ranches throughout the territory, and his investigation had led him back to the area where his law enforcement career had begun. "Jake Morrison," Matt Sullivan called out as Jake rode up to the ranch house. "Look at you. A real territorial marshal with a real badge and everything." Jake dismounted and shook hands with the man who'd given him his first chance. At 17, Jake had grown tall and strong, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from facing danger and proving himself repeatedly. But his eyes still held the intelligence and determination that had impressed Matt 5 years earlier. "Mr. Sullivan," Jake said with genuine warmth, "it's good to see you again. Though I wish it were under better circumstances. These cattle thefts have got everyone spooked." Matt admitted, "They're more organized and systematic than anything we've seen before." Jake nodded, his professional instincts already engaged. "That's why I'm here. This isn't random rustling. Someone's running a sophisticated operation, and I think it might be connected to some other crimes I've been investigating." As they walked toward the ranch house, Matt couldn't help but marvel at the change in Jake. The orphan boy had become a respected lawman, but more than that, he'd retained the character and values that had made him special in the first place. "Jake," Matt said, "I have to ask, do you ever regret leaving ranch work for law enforcement?" Jake smiled at the question. "Mr. Sullivan, what I learned here at the Circle M wasn't just about ranching. You taught me about responsibility, integrity, and standing up for what's right. Everything I've accomplished as a marshal grew from the foundation you helped me build." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young boy, maybe 10 years old, who came running up to them with obvious excitement. "Mr. Sullivan," the boy called out, "there's strange riders near the north pasture again. Same ones I saw yesterday." Jake immediately went into professional mode. "What's your name, son?" "Billy Henderson, sir. My pa works for Mr. Sullivan." "Tell me exactly what you saw, Billy." The boy's description was remarkably detailed and observant, reminding Jake strongly of himself at that age. Billy had noticed not just the presence of the riders, but their behavior, their equipment, and most importantly, the systematic way they were surveying the ranch's layout. "Billy," Jake said seriously, "you've got sharp eyes and a good memory. Have you thought about what you want to do when you grow up?" "I want to be a lawman like you, sir. Everyone says you're the best marshal in the territory." Jake looked at this bright, observant boy and saw something familiar, the same hunger for purpose and recognition that had driven his own development. "Well, Billy, if you want to be a lawman, the first thing you need to learn is how to gather evidence properly. Would you like to help me catch these cattle thieves?" Billy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? You'd let me help?" "With Mr. Sullivan's permission," Jake said, looking at Matt, who nodded his approval. What followed was a masterclass in investigation and strategy. Jake used Billy's observations to piece together the thieves' pattern of operations, identifying their likely targets and timing. More importantly, he taught Billy how to think systematically about criminal behavior, how to anticipate moves and counter moves. "The thieves have been scouting for a week," Jake explained to Billy and Matt. "They're planning something big, probably targeting multiple ranches simultaneously." "How can you tell?" Billy asked eagerly. "Because they're not just looking at individual herds," Jake replied. "They're mapping escape routes, studying the terrain, and timing the movements of ranch hands. That's not simple rustling, that's military-style planning." Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe the brilliant strategy Jake devises to catch these organized criminals. Jake's plan was as elegant as it was effective. Instead of trying to catch the thieves in the act, he would let them think they were succeeding, while actually herding them into a trap of his own design. "We're going to give them exactly what they want," Jake explained to Matt and Billy. "We're going to make it look like the perfect opportunity to steal cattle. And when they take the bait, we'll be ready for them." The trap worked perfectly. Using Billy as his scout and Matt's ranch hands as backup, Jake orchestrated a complex operation that caught the entire cattle theft ring in one coordinated action. But the most significant moment came when Billy, following Jake's instructions, managed to cut off the thieves' escape route at Devil's Canyon, the same location where Jake had made his own reputation 5 years earlier. "That kid's got fire in him," Matt said. Watching 10-year-old Billy help secure the captured criminals with the confidence of someone twice his age. Jake smiled at the familiar words. Sounds like something someone once said about another kid. Think Billy's got what it takes to be a marshal. Jake looked at the boy who'd shown such intelligence, courage, and dedication during the investigation. I think Billy's got everything it takes. The question is whether he'll get the same kind of chance I got. What do you mean? I mean he needs someone to believe in him, to give him opportunities to prove himself, and to teach him that his potential matters. Jake paused, remembering his own desperate need for exactly those things. Mr. Sullivan, you changed my life by taking a chance on an orphan boy. Maybe it's time to take a chance on another kid who just needs someone to see his potential. 6 months later, Billy Henderson began his own training as a junior deputy marshal under Jake Morrison's supervision. The cycle of opportunity, mentorship, and growth that had begun with Matt Sullivan's faith in an orphan boy was continuing with a new generation. Jake's career continued to flourish, but his greatest pride came from the young lawmen he was training and mentoring. He'd learned that true success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about creating opportunities for others to discover their own potential. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of courage, mentorship, and second chances from the American frontier. Hit that subscribe button now because these tales prove that the greatest legacy is the one you create by believing in others. 10 years later, Marshal Jake Morrison stood before a gathering of territorial officials, receiving recognition as the youngest man ever appointed to head the Territorial Marshal Service. In his acceptance speech, he spoke about the importance of seeing potential in unexpected places and giving opportunities to those who might otherwise be overlooked. The frontier teaches us that character isn't determined by circumstances. Jake said to the assembled crowd, it's determined by choices. When Matt Sullivan chose to hire an orphan boy, and when Marshal Bradley chose to train that boy, they weren't just changing one life, they were creating a legacy that continues today. As he spoke, Jake could see Billy Henderson and 3 other young deputies he'd trained sitting in the audience, all of them successful lawmen who were now training the next generation themselves. The kid with fire had become more than just a successful marshal. He'd become proof that investment in young people's potential could create ripples of positive change that spread far beyond anyone's imagination. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these incredible tales of frontier opportunity and mentorship to life. Subscribe now and join us for more amazing stories that prove anyone can achieve greatness when someone believes in their potential.